hadn't stepped foot outside alone in years. Not really. But that night, something inside me whispered, "Go." So I did. The rain fell steadily as I pulled my coat tighter around myself, the damp chill seeping through despite my best efforts to stay warm. It was one of those evenings where the world felt heavy with quiet desperation, the kind that had become all too familiar over the years. Yet here I was stepping into a dimly lit jazz club downtown, drawn by some unseen force I couldn't quite name. Inside, the air was thick with the smoky aroma of aged wood and spilled whiskey, the low murmur of conversations blending seamlessly with the soft clinking of glasses. And then the music began, a slow, haunting melody that seemed to wrap itself around me like a warm embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of 2 decades of monotony lifted, if only for a moment. When Adrian took the stage, the room shifted. His presence commanded attention, confident yet understated, magnetic without trying. The spotlight caught his features just right, highlighting the intensity in his eyes and the curve of his smile as he leaned into the microphone. As his smooth voice filled the space, I found myself captivated, not just by the music but by him. And then it happened. Our eyes met across the crowded room during a particularly soulful note. Time seemed to pause, the noise fading into the background as everything narrowed down to that single connection. There was something in his gaze, an unspoken question, an invitation, that sparked something deep within me. A flicker of longing I thought had been extinguished long ago reignited, catching me off guard. In that fleeting moment, I realized this wasn't just another ordinary night. Something about Adrian, and the way he made me feel alive again, stirred emotions I buried beneath layers of duty and expectation. Whatever this pull was between us, it was undeniable. And as the song ended, leaving the crowd murmuring in awe, I knew my life wouldn't be the same after tonight. After the performance, Adrian approached me at the bar, his presence commanding yet gentle. "You've got great taste in music," he said with a warm smile, nodding toward the stage where his band had just finished playing. His compliment caught me off guard, not because it was extraordinary, but because no one had noticed my choices in so long. I smiled, faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "I could say the same about you." That simple exchange sparked hours of conversation. We talked about everything: art, dreams, regrets, and how life has a way of slipping through your fingers if you're not careful. Adrian listened intently, his eyes never straying from mine, as though every word mattered. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as a wife or caretaker, but as a woman with depth, complexity, and untapped potential. Our connection deepened quickly, fueled by shared vulnerability and unspoken desires. What began as innocent flirtations soon evolved into something more deliberate, clandestine meetings under the guise of ordinary outings. Late-night concerts became our secret world, the music wrapping around us like a cocoon. Stolen afternoons in Adrian's studio apartment followed, where canvases leaned against walls and jazz records played softly in the background. Our whispered phone calls left me breathless, each one pulling me further away from the life I thought I was bound to. With every encounter, pieces of myself I thought were lost forever began to resurface. The boldness, the hunger, the artist who once painted with wild abandon. Adrian saw that part of me, coaxing it back to life with his admiration and encouragement. He didn't just see the woman sitting across from him. He saw the woman I used to be, and the woman I could still become. Each stolen moment awakened something within me, reminding me what it felt like to live fully without restraint. And though guilt lingered at the edges of these fleeting joys, it wasn't enough to stop me, not when Adrian made me feel alive again. One afternoon, while sketching in Adrian's studio, I glanced up to find him watching me. His gaze was soft yet intense, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, longing. My hand froze mid-stroke, the pencil hovering above the paper as our eyes met. "You have no idea how beautiful you are when you create," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but heavy with meaning. His words struck me like a thunderclap, jolting me out of the haze I'd been living in for years. It wasn't just about passion or attraction, it went beyond that. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about him. It was about me, about reclaiming pieces of myself I thought were lost forever, buried under layers of duty and compromise. Here was someone who saw me not as a wife, mother, or caretaker, but as an artist, a woman capable of creation and depth. Adrian didn't stop there. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Why did you stop painting?" The question hung in the air, simple yet devastating in its clarity. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. How could I explain decades of neglect? The way life had slowly chipped away at my dreams until they felt more like memories than possibilities. "You should start again," he urged gently. "Paint without fear, without restraint." His confidence in me was intoxicating, awakening a hunger I hadn't felt in years. That evening, surrounded by his sketches and half-finished canvases, I picked up a brush for the first time in over 2 decades. As the bristles touched the canvas, color spilling across the surface, I felt alive in a way I couldn't remember feeling before. Each stroke was a rebellion against the silence society had imposed on me, a declaration that I still existed outside the roles I played. With every stolen moment we shared, our connection deepened. We explored each other, not just physically, but emotionally, unearthing parts of ourselves we'd hidden away. Adrian encouraged me to dream again, to imagine a life beyond the one I'd built. Yet guilt lingered, gnawing at the edges of my newfound freedom. Was I betraying my husband, my family, or was I simply reclaiming what was rightfully mine, a sense of self I'd sacrificed long ago? Despite the weight of these questions, I couldn't deny the truth. I felt more alive than I had in years. And though the path ahead was uncertain for the first time, I allowed myself to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved this second chance. Every moment with Adrian felt like walking a tightrope, balancing exhilaration and guilt in equal measure. On one hand, I was acutely aware of the vows I'd made, the promises etched into my memory that now seemed more like chains than commitments. My husband, though distant, didn't deserve this betrayal. The thought of hurting him gnawed at me, a relentless ache that surfaced during quiet moments when Adrian wasn't around to distract me. What would he think if he knew? How could I ever explain something I barely understood myself? And yet, there was no denying the vitality coursing through my veins whenever Adrian was near. His presence awakened parts of me I had buried long ago, parts one didn't even realize were still alive until his laughter filled the room or his fingers brushed mine. He made me feel whole again, as though I had been living half a life without even noticing it. But each lingering touch, each knowing glance, reminded me of what I was risking. Not just my marriage, but also the carefully constructed identity I'd built over decades. The guilt intensified during our most intimate moments. When we lay together under the soft glow of his studio lights, surrounded by canvases streaked with color, I couldn't help but wonder, is this worth it? Every stolen kiss carried the weight of consequence. Every whispered word felt like crossing another invisible line. Yet, for all the turmoil inside me, I found myself unable to walk away. Each time I considered ending things, withdrawing from this dangerous dance, I was met with Adrian's unwavering belief in me. "You deserve more than shadows," he told me one night, his voice steady and sure as he traced a finger along my jawline. "Don't let anyone dim your light." His words hit me like a tidal wave, stirring emotions I'd spent years suppressing. Who was I anymore? Was I still the dutiful wife clinging to an empty shell of a marriage? Or was I someone else entirely, someone bold enough to chase freedom, even if it meant losing everything familiar? The conflict tore at me, leaving me restless and uncertain, part of me wanted to retreat, to bury these feelings before they destroyed what little stability I had left. But another part, a part growing stronger with each passing day, refused to let go of the fire Adrian had ignited within me. Even so, doubt lingered. Could I really keep going down this path? And where would it lead us both? The affair had become a kaleidoscope of emotions, vivid, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. Each stolen moment with Adrian pulled me further from the life I thought I was bound to, but it also brought me closer to a version of myself I barely recognized yet desperately wanted to reclaim. The breaking point came quietly, unexpectedly, on an ordinary morning. I stood before an easel dusted with fresh paint, my hands trembling as I stared at the canvas. It wasn't just art staring back at me, it was clarity. Every brushstroke felt like rebellion against years of silence, every color a reminder that I still existed outside the roles I played. I realized then what I had to do. Walking away from my marriage wouldn't be easy. It would hurt people I cared about, including my husband. But staying meant losing what little remained of my soul. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I chose me. Not just for Adrian, for the love we shared, but for the fragments of myself I'd abandoned long ago. With shaking hands, I wrote a letter to my husband. The words spilled out raw and unfiltered, each sentence heavy with honesty and compassion. I've spent so much of my life giving pieces of myself away. I confessed that I forgot who I am. This isn't about blame or anger. It's about finding myself again. When I finished, I left the note on the kitchen counter where he'd surely find it. My heart pounded as I packed a suitcase, folding clothes quickly but carefully, aware that this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Driving to Adrian's apartment felt surreal, like stepping into a dream I never thought possible. As I knocked on his door, my pulse raced, not from fear, but from anticipation. When he opened it, his eyes widened briefly before softening with understanding. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, holding me as if he knew exactly how hard this decision had been. In that embrace, I felt seen not as a wife, mother, or caretaker, but simply as Eleanor. Walking away from my marriage was both a relief and a wound. The first few weeks were a blur of emotions, guilt gnawing at the edges of my resolve, but also an overwhelming sense of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. Friends called, their voices laced with concern or thinly veiled judgment. "Are you sure about this?" one asked, her tone hovering between curiosity and disapproval. Family gatherings became minefields. My sister's sidelong glances spoke volumes, while my brother-in-law muttered something about midlife crises. Whispers rippled through our suburban community like wildfire, scandalous conjectures that painted me as either reckless or desperate. Yet, amid the chaos, there was peace. A quiet kind of joy returned to me through the act of creation. My paintings grew bolder, brighter, each stroke infused with colors I hadn't dared use before. They were no longer just images on canvas. They were pieces of myself laid bare, fragments of a spirit I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Adrian noticed it too. "This is who you are," he said one evening, standing behind me as I worked. His hands brushed lightly against my shoulders, grounding me in the moment. He never pressured me to conform, never asked me to shrink myself for anyone else's comfort. Instead, he celebrated every step I took toward rediscovering who I was meant to be. Together, we navigated the complexities of our relationship, the age gap, the judgment, the lingering uncertainties about what lay ahead. Conversations stretched late into the night, filled with equal parts laughter and vulnerability. We talked about fears, dreams, and the weight of choosing love outside societal norms. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the magnitude of everything we'd risked threatened to overwhelm us. But Adrian's unwavering belief in us kept me anchored. "We're not running from anything," he reminded me once. "We're running towards something real." For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My heart beat in rhythm with the music we shared, not just jazz melodies spilling from his saxophone, but the unspoken harmony between us. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was enough. Amid the fallout, I found clarity. I had chosen myself not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I would face it with courage, with color, and with him by my side. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility as I stood before the canvas, streaked with vivid hues that seemed to pulse with life. My hands were still smudged with color, evidence of hours spent pouring myself onto the surface. Each stroke a rebellion, each shade a piece of my soul laid bare. I stepped back, tilting my head to take it all in. The painting was chaotic, yet harmonious, much like the journey I'd been on these past months. A soft smile tugged at my lips as I realized something profound. I had made the right choice, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Later that evening, Adrian and I found ourselves sitting side by side on a park bench, the world bathed in the golden light of sunset. His hand rested gently on mine, a silent promise of support and partnership that spoke louder than words ever could. We didn't need to say anything. The weight of everything we'd shared hung between us, unspoken but understood. Together, we watched as the sky blazed with fiery oranges and deep purples, the horizon ablaze with the kind of beauty that feels fleeting yet eternal. As the colors danced across the heavens, I whispered softly to myself, almost imperceptibly, "Sometimes you have to burn down the old to build something new." The words felt true, resonating deep within me. Our path ahead was uncertain. Whether our relationship would endure remained an open question. But for the first time in years, uncertainty no longer frightened me. I had chosen myself, reclaimed pieces of who I was, and dared to imagine who I might become. And though the road forward promised challenges, I knew one thing for certain. I was enough. Whatever came next, I would face it not as someone's wife or caretaker, but as Eleanor, a woman whole unto herself. That knowledge alone was freedom, and it was enough. Throughout this journey, I've wrestled with questions that cut deeper than I ever imagined. Can love exist outside societal norms, or is it inherently destructive when it defies expectations? With Adrian or Ethan or Alex, it wasn't rebellion for its own sake. It was a spark of something raw and real, something that made me feel alive again after years of feeling invisible. Yet every stolen moment carried the weight of judgment, not just from others, but from myself. Was this love worth the cost of everything familiar? How do we reconcile our deepest desires with the consequences of pursuing them? That question haunted me late at night when the house was quiet, and all I could hear was the echo of my choices. Choosing Adrian meant stepping away from safety, from vows I once believed defined me. But staying would have meant sacrificing pieces of myself I wasn't ready to lose. The tension between what I wanted and what I owed others felt like walking a tightrope without a net. Rebuilding my identity after decades of living for others has been messy, painful, and uncertain. It's not just about moving forward. It's about facing the person I became along the way. There are days when shame lingers, whispering doubts about whether I'm worthy of happiness. But there are also moments when I see glimpses of redemption, not through perfection, but through courage. Courage to live authentically, even if it means facing uncertainty and judgment. This story isn't one of tidy resolutions or clear moral victories. It's an exploration of transformation, of learning to embrace imperfection while holding space for both regret and hope. Sometimes the greatest act of bravery isn't finding all the answers. It's choosing to keep going even when you don't.